Before we jump in, I want to clarify the scope of today's session. Given the nature of the audience, the presentation is going to lean really heavily into digital experiences with some UX UI. I do zoom out from time to touch on broader design practices, but this isn't an exhaustive scan of all design fields by any means. As we go through the sessions, if any thoughts or questions pop up, feel free to drop them in the chat. Please stay on mute until the end of the call, as this is much more of a talk than a workshop. I don't think I'm going to have time at the end of today's talk to address questions or have a good discussion, but what I have thought to do is I'm going to create some sessions on ADP in the following days. And then any of you who have joined this talk and want to discuss or have questions about any of the content that we've gone through, we can use those sessions to have like a much smaller group and a nice chat around the content rather than squeeze all of that into today's session, because I've got quite a lot to get through and I'd like to be able to focus on that. Just remember to be mindful of respecting others when you're communicating in the chat so that everybody feels comfortable here today. We may have different opinions, that's okay. And finally, just to let you know that this call is recorded and it's going to be posted into Designlab's YouTube channel within the next couple of weeks. This is me. These are my socials. Warmly invite you to connect with me on LinkedIn, or if you want to have a more in-depth conversation, you can book a meeting through ADP if it's on this topic. And then also I will create those group sessions after this so that we can have some like focused discussion about this topic. If something today during the session inspires or provokes thought, please share it on LinkedIn using any of the hashtags I've suggested in the slide. I really love to keep this conversation going beyond today as much as possible. And now to me, I'm Crystal. I'm a service designer and a design researcher. I have a deep passion for climate, social and multi-species justice. And I'm really interested in exploring the roles that we as designers can play in these critical areas. I'm super excited to share my design research with you. I work on it in a yearly cycle, collecting things as I find them, and then coming up with the themes just before these events. I've been doing an event like this once every year since 2020. My goal, as I said before, is really to inspire you and spark new ideas that you can bring into your own design practice. I'm really curious about the state of our practice and the world around us, and I'm looking forward to sharing these topics and discussing them with you. As we accelerate into the climate emergency, extreme weather events have become an inescapable reality, something many of us have experienced firsthand or through people we know. Terms like climate change and climate emergency are no longer abstract concepts. They've become part of our everyday conversations as we reflect on those extra hot, extra wet, extra cold, snowy or windy days. Just last week, I was preparing to deliver this presentation when my hometown, Porto, in northern Portugal, was suddenly enveloped in a toxic, smoky cloud. Our little seaside neighborhood, due to its geographic layout and wind patterns, became a concentration point for the smoke. The fires were inland, actually. They weren't close to us. The closest was about 100 kilometers away, but the fires multiplied rapidly due to the intense heat wave we were experiencing, and the smoke started gathering in the area in which we were, which you can see is that blue dot on the map over there, compared to the fires, which were a little bit further back. By Tuesday night, we had to make the difficult decision to leave with our family for a few days so that we could get to air that was fresher. We were obviously amongst the privileged few who could leave and return to a home, Many others were not so fortunate. Fires have resulted in deaths of people and animals, widespread destruction of nature, ecologies, infrastructure, property, and beloved homes. The worst toxic smoke clouds in 22 years, apparently, and they continue to drift across Europe, and they are now moving into Spain and France, with major health impacts that are difficult to measure. Meanwhile, firefighters, the civil guard, and countless unseen and acknowledged others are making a difference on the front line. This just goes to show the impact of an event and how many lives and systems it touches. During this time, we became intense users of two apps. AccuWeather's air quality intensity feature became essential. That's the one on the left. Although I found myself taking screenshots to keep a historical view of changes over time. So that's a little hint for a new feature that I would appreciate. And the forecast of air quality over the next 4 days was really helpful to help us make decisions about what we were going to do and when we were going to return. We also heavily relied on Google's wildfires feature, which rolled out in 2010, but only rolled out in Portugal this June. So that was really helpful, and it allowed us to view the increasing number of fires in real time, zoom into areas of concern, and then also understand the severity. Again, a timeline feature to track changes over time would have been really helpful to see if things were getting worse or getting better. These features suddenly played a critical role in my family, helping us navigate the crisis we were in and make safer decisions. Well, let's go deeper. Sometimes it can feel like the world is so broken that nothing will ever change. But the world has changed before, and it will change again. There are alternate worlds and new ways of being and doing that can shape a better future. I am proudly a get your hands dirty kind of designer, and these uncertain times have made me more poetic, philosophical even, and certainly daring enough to share and set lofty goals like giving a damn, being purposeful, and owning the impact we make in our design practice. And that's why I do this, to share it out. As an interaction designers, we're all aware that we design for choices. And as designers of choices that we make people take, we need more consciousness, more purpose, more mindfulness, more active design doing. Yes, there's a lot to be worried about when it comes to the climate emergency and global events and people's behaviors, but there's also a need to remain hopeful and honest and stubbornly optimistic so that we can counteract apathy. I'm going to share some of those musings that I call practices, so you can take and own them for yourselves if they resonate. But also stay true to self, and we'll dig into some real-world practical applications of what purposeful planet and people design looks like today, and how we could shift it towards more positive behaviors in the near future. I can't begin without first taking a time to look around me and behind us to see what's happened this year. As designers, I believe we have to be interested not just in the state of our practice, but in the state of the world. Right now, as ever, the world feels disorientated, divided, and exploitable. Some of the events we've faced this year, 3/4 of the way through, we've witnessed a staggering amount of change from the natural world overlapping into our digital landscapes. The volume and strength of weather events have battered every corner of the globe, flooding, droughts, fires, and when not touching us personally, they touch people and places we know and love. Using this lens, I'm going to take you through a selection of global events, and as I do, I ask you to reflect on these and how much people and planet and our design practice are interconnected with one another. This is not at all sequential, but I am going to go from left to right, from top to bottom. Mega flooding in Brazil And then Bangladesh submerged cities and communities, brought airports to a standstill in the UAE, and had major impacts across the US, Philippines, and Asia. And we had more scenes with Central and Eastern Europe and Myanmar having devastating floods just this week, and West and Central Africa enduring their own climate-induced flooding disasters. Extreme weather is really no longer an exception for us. If we dial back a little early into the year, parts of the US were gifted with a total solar eclipse, marking one of the few times that Earth, Moon, and Sun align. And for a brief moment, some of us were able to pause and look up in wonder, reminded of the delicate, awe-inspiring dance of planets and our place in the universe. Coming back here on ground, Taylor Swift's Eras tour had its own moment of impact in global economics. This was dubbed the Taylor Swift effect, and her tour boosted the GDP of several countries. In others, caused the cost of living prices to spike. However, as the world spotlight focuses on her, many continue to hope she could use her platform to take a more active stance on climate change. But what she did do a week or so ago was make headlines for endorsing Kamala Harris following the debate. And that endorsement leading to an angry and ridiculous outburst from Trump with his famous Truth Social post there in the left of the slide, which I'm not going to repeat. While parts of the world battled with too much water in the top right-hand corner, other places were struggling with the opposite. For the first time in recorded history, Amazon River completely dried up after an extended drought, leaving devastating consequences for communities and ecosystems. In the tech world, we saw tensions around AI and digital ownership rising to new heights. There was a court case with Scarlett Johansson and ChatGPT, with Johansson suing ChatGPT over the unauthorized use of her voice, an echo of the film Her from 2013. This year also shattered records in terms of climate. We got the hottest summer on record. And while we expected support for Ukraine to be tested this year as it was, we also saw a struggle for peace in Eastern Europe. Meanwhile, on the bottom left, we had a race for the stars, an obsession with the moon and space. We saw astronauts push boundaries. This astronaut set the record for spending 1,000 days in space. Can you imagine what that must feel like? And there were 2 other astronauts left in space after thinking they were going for 8 days, later being told that they were going to be there for 8 months. Elon Musk, also involved in the space race, announced to become the world's first first trillionaire entrepreneur in 2025. A gross example of money. Back at home, we had the cyclical nature of life, with billions of cicadas emerging in an overlapping of 2 different broods, creating a rare natural phenomenon. And the buzz of the cicadas apparently was heard across eastern United States, making a unique moment in nature, one that highlights how interwoven cycles of life are, despite the chaos of the human world. Speaking of which, another trend was fast fashion's environmental toll came to light, with brands like Shein contributing to global fast fashion crisis. Every day, 4 Boeings worth of clothing are shipped out, feeding an insatiable demand for cheap disposable fashion that's coming at a cost. And finally, the fragility of our digital infrastructure, that which we design into, was made painfully clear when there was a worldwide Microsoft system outage that no one could hardly believe, that brought services globally to a standstill. Billions of users depending on the system, and an outage that lasted several days exposed just how reliant we are on a few lines of code. One small failure can really ripple across the entire world, disrupting everything from banking to healthcare systems. I'm going to end on my favorite picture of the year, where we have the Better Business Network in the UK, who just became the 3rd company in the UK and the 4th in the world to add nature to their board of directors, much like you may have heard a couple of years ago, Patagonia did that. They created a new role within the company, which was specifically designed to represent the views of nature and the wider natural world. As well, nature and non-human stakeholders became more of a common term in business. These are times of uncertainty, and in these times we can no longer have the comfortable affordances that digital experiences charmed us with, telling us that we were designing to improve people's lives, while quietly opening doors to portals of addictive hooks, deceptive UX, and dark patterns, where experiences of people have come at the cost of mental health, the planet, and what we like to term non-users. Interaction design isn't just about making things look good or flow smoothly. The experiences we design reflect how we think, how we value people, how we value the planet, how we expect to engage with the world, and how our work can reflect the world we want to see. But all is not lost. I continue to search and I see space for new conversations. I see space in experiences that are reconnecting people with the beauty and wonder and enchantment of the natural world, inspiring a deeper relationship with the earth and its beings. Call that the art of enchantment. We shift from our focus from human-centered design to earth-centered design, where the well-being of the planet is mindfully at the core of our creative practices and processes. We are shifting from a short-term to a long-term view and allowing things to start to move at their own pace and make thoughtful, deliberate, slow decisions. We guide people's choices with small intentional nudges in an area that we already excel in. Now we can focus on stewarding more sustainable and thoughtful choices and actions. Our design impact and ethos can begin to advocate for multi-species justice for all living beings, non-living entities, and maybe even machines, and contribute to a more equitable and balanced world. Ultimately, what I'm exploring today with you is how we use our design practice purposefully, not just to help people navigate this increasingly fragile, fragmented, and uncertain world, but also to rebuild it piece by piece, pixel by pixel, with a focus on planet and the more than human world that surrounds us. So I'll start with the first one. Enchantment is an intentional and deliberate act. In design, it's about creating moments of awe and connection, moments where people can pause and experience and begin to connect with the natural world, fostering a deeper relationship between people and planet. It's design we are creating to foster this, and it's also a practice I encourage you to start seeking out for yourself to nurture your own enchantment. Let's have a look at some examples. This is Tree FM. I find it to be an inspiring example of how digital design can bring enchantment of nature into our everyday lives with simple and thoughtful design. The platform isn't just about streaming nature sounds, it's about creating a moment of connection with the natural world, even when we're sitting in front of a screen. The interface is minimalistic and it focuses the user's attention on the auditory experience, and it also shows a forest. At the moment, it doesn't always show the forest that is from that audio, but I've looked at their roadmap and I see that that is a future plan. They use the power of sound to draw us back, reminding us of the beauty and tranquility that forests can offer. Here we have nature as an artist on Spotify, transforming our experience of natural sounds and inviting us to engage with them as if nature itself were an artist. What I find fascinating here is the business model, the royalties. So what you can do, any artist who's verified on Spotify can do a collaboration with nature, the verified user, and then the royalties generated from playing the tracks get split between the human artist and nature as an artist. And those monies that are generated go directly into an environmental conservation efforts. This means that simply by listening, we can contribute to the preservation of ecosystems. From a design perspective, this project is really one of the most brilliant examples of how digital platforms and clever ways of looking at systems can blend art, technology, and sustainable business models using the enchantment of nature. Oh, good. I thought I might have lost this. I'm going to play this now. I hope it is going to work. Do we have sound? Maybe not. Well, I think there isn't any sound. That's a shame. It's nice sound. But I can also just talk over this, so that also works just fine for me. This is the game called Terra Nil, and it captivated me because it was a digital experience and enchant us through digital nature. The game is about turning wastelands into ecosystems, but actually it's about immersing players in the joy of ecological restoration. Each action, purifying the soil, creating rivers, fostering biomes, unfolds a narrative of renewal that becomes rewarding for that player. I think I have, okay, there we go. Let's see if we can move to the next slide. Seems to be a little stuck. Just bear with me, please. Okay, I'm going to reshare because it looks like we were stuck. Okay, I think the video was a little bit heavy for that, but that's fine. I've moved on and I can share the screen again. Now we step out of the digital and into the real world. This is the River Tone in the UK, a historically rich waterway, served as a vital navigation route. Like many of Britain's rivers, the Tone has faced significant challenges of urban development, loss of natural habitats, climate change, and development and infrastructure. On the bottom right, this is a group called Future Soundings who create audio interventions that seek to reconnect the community with their river through the power of sound and to experience the river in a new way. These soundscapes aren't just recordings, they're a form of speculative design that blends past, present, and imagined future of the river. Let's have a listen. Let's hope it works. Okay, now I'm going to press play.
It's the middle of spring and the sun is surprisingly warm. You're by the River Tone, near the old oaks of the Atlantic rainforest. Rain comes, wetting the forest. Lichen and fern, every branch and sandstone outcrop suitably misted. The moss has picked up some soggy heat, but the river water's still cold. Here, the river is jumpy, excited as it bubbles and builds. You see a trout, and with a dash, the dazzling blue and orange of a kingfisher pierces the crystal water. People from the nearby homes are enjoying the shade, where tree planting has taken place. Lots of families are wading upstream. Since flights became too expensive, people are relishing what they have locally.
Okay, I hope you heard that. I'll go back to this now. From a design perspective, this project exemplifies how enchantment can be used as a design tool to engage the imagination and creativity of a community. And this helps them then work with the government and the river as a nature persona to envision a future where the river's natural rhythms and the community life can once again be in harmony. This is an observation practice for the Your 2040 gathering that I am the creative lead on, and is centered around deepening our connections to the more than human world. It was an observational and meditative sensory practice with a notebook and reading prompts that allowed people to interact, embody, connect, and feel the wonder and beauty of the nature around them so that they could bring those experiences back and then represent them to others later. In this picture, we have one of the participants connecting with meadow. An example of some of the writings from the practice. So an example of some of the practice, I'll read it to you. Plug your ears with your fingers to drown everything out. Slowly release your fingers and let the sounds flow in. When a sound arrives, follow it for as long as you can until it fades away. Then listen on for the next sound. Perhaps there was a sound so quiet you could not hear it the first time. Identify the natural sounds and the human-made ones and notice how these are interwoven. So there was a set of different practices that engaged all the different senses, and this enabled people at the event to have a more connected experience of the natural entity that they were assigned at the time. And this is just one more way that you can work with either yourself or people to rekindle and deepen that connection to nature, to remind yourself how these small moments can guide our designs. Let's now shift our focus from individual experience to a broader perspective, moving from human-centered design to plant-centered design, planet-centered design, where I will talk more about conceptually about tools and methodologies. In a world facing urgent ecological challenges, it's obvious that we can no longer enough to design with just humans in mind. We have to consider the breadth and width of the ecosystem, acknowledging that every decision we make impacts not just people, but the planet as a whole. This shift requires us to expand our thinking, our tool set, and our design processes to include the needs of all living beings and natural systems. It's about designing in harmony with the environment rather than in opposition to it. Traditionally, design has been around creating the best possible experience for the user, the human. And of course, this has led to many innovations. It's also neglected the broader impacts on the planet. Here is a seawall in Sydney that uses special tiles that mimic natural habitats, and it helps marine life flourish right in the heart of the city. That's a really good example of how design and urban spaces can support all forms of life and balance city living with supporting and flourishing the natural elements of our environment. It's also crucial to broaden our perspective, to shift from that human-centered to planet-centered approach. This means recognizing that every design decision has a ripple effect. And one of the most effective ways to foster that thinking is through a combination of design, storytelling, and science. And by weaving together these different aspects and creating compelling narratives with data, we can create stories that not only engage but also educate. This helps people to envision and communicate broader impacts of our designs on the environment. I will now show a little bit of this project. Let's go over here. There we go.
Time felt different. There was more of it. More time to be generous and more time to rest. A deep quiet, an untamed freedom.
This was created by speculative agency Superflux in London, who work with science and foresight and storytelling to help design imaginings that people can embody. These friezes of illustrations and text were put up in places in London where people could stop and ponder and gather and think about what it might mean to move from human to planet-centered. Our tools and frameworks must also evolve. Traditional design tools are there to focus on user experience and business goals, and you will be seeing that every day in your work and also if you are studying to become a designer. But we're seeing terms like multi-species design, interspecies design, and more than human design, and design practices like life-centered, planet-centric or earth-centered design, and also climate design are starting to become keywords in design. These ideas move away from the usual focus on humans and instead put a focus on nature and putting other species at the center of our design practices, and shifts the conversation to a higher level. Instead of just using nature as an inspiration or a resource, we can have approaches that design with nature, prioritizing nature's needs. And this creates new questions like, if a river or an ecosystem has rights, can they be included in the design process? And this is where we see things like non-human personas, or what I prefer to term them, nature personas. Some examples. There are lots of web examples of how to design sustainably for low-impact websites, but we see less of them in consumer brands. So here is a Danish consumer brand, an underwear brand, where you can actually toggle between the dynamic options and lower the energy demand of their digital service. So this reduces carbon footprint. It teaches users about low impact websites, which is really important to start having that knowledge, and still sort of gives them that way out if they want to see an image. I'd really like to start to see more of this in consumer brands. This is a search engine, Ecosia. They have been around for a while, but they do have a more recent update that just goes beyond the fact of you search and we can plant trees. They are now showing real-time data on the environmental impact that you can see in the bottom left-hand corner, and how that is actually translating to actions that they're making on the ground. This has been around for a little while now, but is expanding globally. And this is the eco-friendly routing feature. And this is a good UX feature example that takes UX to the next level and integrates real-time air quality data and sustainable travel options. It not only prioritizes user convenience, but also highlights the importance of making environmentally conscious choices and allowing people to make that choice themselves. Again, another example that is rolling out globally, and we got ours in Portugal and Spain a couple of weeks ago. This is the Circular Hub. And I think it's a really good example of the breadth of what planet-centered design and UX design and interaction design can look like, because they have considered all touch points, all experience touch points, and also how the system works as a whole. Now we can have a look at slow experiences. We like to say that today is a fast-paced world where we've been prioritizing speed and efficiency, but I challenge you to be part of the growing movement that thinks differently about this, and you begin to embrace slow experiences. It encourages us to shift from short-term to long-term thinking, designing not just for immediate gratification, but for lasting impact. And what about the fact that our designs will outlast us? Shouldn't we also think about where they're going to be in 5 to 10 years' time? Slow experiences invite us to create products and services that foster mindfulness, encourage a more purposeful way of browsing, and ultimately lead to more sustainable and meaningful choices. We've been seeing a resurgence of simple or dumb phones and the rise of anti-Wi-Fi cafes, or just mobile unfriendly cafes, all responses to the overwhelming pace of digital life. These trends reflect our desire to disconnect from the constant barrage of information and phone and blue screens, and start to reconnect with the present moment, spending time with people, looking at them face to face at a coffee shop, as opposed to both of you looking down at your phone and, I don't know, catching up on Instagram. These phones offer to remove distractions, and their selling point is that you will have experiences at a slower pace, helping you to focus on what truly matters, taking your focus away from the phone and back into the world around us. This is an app that has been around for a very long time, and there are many others like it, and there are many that I could have shown from 2023 and 2024, but I think it's quite nice to show an example of an app that has had a legacy. This app is called Forest, and you download it on your phone, and then you start it up, and you cannot use your phone and because it will disturb the app. And while the app is growing, you're also growing a tree at the same time, a digital tree. And over there on the right, you can see the forest that this person has been growing, because each tree represents how long they stayed away on their phone for. In a world where convenience is everything, we can consider intentionally adding friction to mobile apps. And that could feel counterintuitive, but if we design with friction, like slowing down interactions or requiring more deliberate actions, we can encourage users and support them to engage more thoughtfully with the content and services. Here's an example of a way to increase friction through having delayed notifications. And that comes through in the feature like the Do Not Disturb mode on smartphones. By batching up notifications, this feature is encouraging us to focus on what we're doing without having that constant interruption. And as users who have been using digital experiences, some of us are native digital experience users at this point, we know all too well about the badges and the notifications and the little sounds that phones can make to pull your attention away. Another example of intentional friction is Gmail's undo send feature, which now adds a brief delay before an email is sent. And this allows you to reconsider your actions, have a little bit of time, and reduce the chance of sending something you might regret. I know we've all been there. We also have Instagram's take a break reminder, which is a great example of friction again that promotes healthier habits. So Instagram aware that people can Instagram for literally hours, rolled out this feature to encourage people to pause their scrolling after a set period. And this helps them foster a more intentional use. So consider the role of slow design in your work as you move forward. I'd like to leave you with a few questions, like how can you create products that stand the test of time? What design choices can you make to encourage mindfulness and intentional use? And how can you balance the need for convenience with the benefit of slowing down? We go into meaningful nudges, subtle design interventions that guide users towards making better decisions, whether for their own well-being or for society or for the environment, without restricting the freedom of choice, but still having the other option. By carefully designing these nudges, we can encourage behaviors that lead to positive outcomes and create digital experiences that not only serve the user, but contribute to a greater good. One very powerful nudge is the use of carbon footprint labels on products, and we're starting to see it come into digital app space too. By making the environmental impact of a purchase visible at the point of decision, these labels encourage consumers to consider sustainability in their buying choices. And a subtle reminder like this can influence behavior by tapping into our desire to make responsible choices, leading to a greater demand for eco-friendly products and a reduction in overall carbon emissions. Here's an example from a Norwegian supermarket, Oda, who added a CO2 footprint to their receipts, and they have really interesting data which results in shoppers choosing to buy less red meat. Here's another example of the same thing. This is a meaningful nudge from Google that it added to its flight search feature, that little green label there on the right-hand side, and it displays the estimated carbon emissions for each flight option. By highlighting lower emission flights, Google is subtly encouraging users to consider the environmental impact of their travel choices and make different decisions without reducing their options, still showing the menu of what they have there. Here we have Apple's privacy nudges, providing users with reminders to review and adjust their app permissions. Apple continuously updates these. And they have also designed into them that they are gentle prompts that encourage users to be more mindful of their digital privacy, helping them take control of their personal information. And this is a feedback loop that came from a couple of years ago, where we started to have a lot of pop-ups that were asking users, especially in the EU and the UK, asking users if they were willing to share their cookies. Multi-species justice. Justice and rights reminds us that despite all our differences, we are all fundamentally deserving of respect and consideration. The problem with the traditional human rights story is that in an effort with one another, we saw it as necessary to disconnect from the web of life. If we anoint ourselves as the sole citizens of Earth and proclaim other beings with no rights or moral or legal walls, the more than human justice story is about regrounding ourselves in the animal and sensory world, which we have always been a part. And some even argue that machines and robots, artifacts that share our fragile planet, should have rights too, because mistreating them would degrade our standards of social behavior. If robots and AI become truly sentient or conscious, their case for rights will surely strengthen. I'm not sure if any of you watched this Apple TV show. It's excellent. It's called Extrapolations. In the last, I won't give any spoilers away. In the last episode, we see a conversation with the last whale. Is a creature that once thrived, but now represents all fragility of life on Earth. It's not just human survival that's at stake here. The more than human world, plants, animals, ecosystems are equally affected by the design decisions we make. And our work needs to reflect a deep understanding of how creations influence not just humans, but all of us. So let me play this. This is some recorded sounds from whales, just so that you can get a taster of what this conversation might have felt like for this person. And back to real life, a team of researchers at MIT, working with a nonprofit that's focused on using AI to understand whales, has used statistical models to analyze whale coda, and they've managed to identify structure to the language that's really similar to the features of the vocalizations that humans use. In summary, that could mean that whales' conversations could one day be interpreted by humans. So maybe that TV show future isn't that far away. This is a project called Plantiverse. In fact, I will start with the video.
What if even someone like me, the plant, could own myself, the land I grow on, and the fruits of my own labor?
I welcome you to watch the whole video. It's really interesting. It's a project on the metaverse that's pushing the boundaries of the rights of nature movement by granting operational, financial, and civil rights to plants. The plants have senses, and that allows them to make decisions for their well-being. And then these interactions are visualized into digital twins, which you can see on the left-hand side. So that's a digital twin of an actual plant. And then those are minted as NFTs. The NFTs can be bought, and the funds generated from the buying of the NFTs are managed by the plants themselves through a distributed autonomous organization. So this is like a really clever and interesting way of how we can use technology and business models and art and creativity. And this project for me really defines how we think about multi-species justice, and we envision a future where plants can actively participate in their own environmental restoration and well-being. Speaking of machines, recent updates to ChatGTP have made it more emotionally attuned, allowing for deeper, more human-like connections with users. So if you type in a more emotional way, apparently the quality of the answers is higher. This ability to empathize and respond with emotional nuance can enhance our own user experience, also making the interactions more engaging and fulfilling. And there's also a lot of really interesting conversation online at the moment about like how we should treat chat models like ChatGTP. So I'll ask you, when you type into ChatGTP or similar, do you write, please can you, or do you just say, give me? And why do you choose to do that? And what do you think, what do you think is the implication of speaking in that way into the models? The question of how exactly to represent human decision-making with the rights of all life forms, natural resources and future generations is really hard, but people are trying. And there was a very interesting project with the UK government using more than human perspectives to adopt a futures approach to freshwater planning. In this project, those are the people below, they considered the more than human perspective by running the UK government's first ever interspecies council. This was a practice that used improv, participatory techniques and theatre to bring the voice of nature into decision making. It's an adaptation of the Council of All Beings, which is an exercise created by Joanna Macy. And I've got a little recording here that I would like to share with you. And again, this is also like a really interesting video to watch from the beginning.
Environment that it inhabits. So imagine you're looking through the eyes of this non-human creature. And you look around and see a circle full of other non-human creatures. So do tell us who you represent and share your concerns with this council.
We are trying to tell humans there's something wrong, but we're also trying to tell them that they can fix it.
The river's got a lot of history. It's quite an important part of Barking, and it's part of my history. I felt quite emotional when I was talking about the river and how the rubbish that is collected from the Essex fields then goes down into the Thames.
Heard from the bee, heard from yew tree, the reed warbler, little egret. The European eel was very vocal. Soil, I think, was incredibly sort of confident. It was just like, I've seen it all before. I've seen this all. I've seen the dinosaurs come and go.
Yes. So I think that is, this is where I have ended my presentation. I wanted to end on this particular slide because I think it's a really interesting example of how we as designers can start looking at our processes and practice to be able to become those advocates and mediators for nature and for planet. As we come to the end of our time together, I wanted to leave you with a few thoughts. I've explored how design can be a powerful tool for change, not just for people anymore, but how important it is for the planet and all its inhabitants. And if it's reconnecting with nature or embracing slower, more deliberate experiences, being the guide of meaningful choices, or advocating for multi-species justice and shifting our work from human-centered to earth-centered, our design work really has the potential to shape a better future. The challenges we face are immense, but so too is our capacity unlimited to create, innovate, and inspire. As designers, we have really a unique place in the world that can influence behaviors and systems and structures in ways that can make a real impactful difference. So I invite you to commit to using your skills, your creativity, and your platform to design with purpose, to design for impact, and to design for the world that you want to see. Thank you for being part of this journey today. Take these ideas back to your own practice, reflect on them, see how they can be integrated into the work you do. As I said at the beginning of our time together today, I will set up some group sessions on ADP lists. So just search for my name and the group sessions should come up. And if you have the time and you have questions and you would like to discuss some of the things that you learned with me today in those sessions, then you are welcome to join those. Together we can turn these small actions into meaningful change. And let's keep the conversation going everywhere and share this out with other designers you know, because the work is far from over. It's just the beginning. Thank you very much for hanging in there when there was some not great Wi-Fi. I noticed a few notifications and also when I fell offline. But see you soon and keep in touch. And thank you for coming. I'm going to switch off now. Goodbye. Keep well.